It is time for Litvak Leadership Live. I am here tonight with my special guest, and I've got a question for her that I haven't even told her about because we've just been chit-chatting. My special guest, Debbie Bettendorf. Debbie, say hi.
Hello, how are you doing, Sean and audience? It's good to be here.
I am having a tremendous day, and I'm sure the audience is having a tremendous day too. Debbie and I met when Steve, why am I blanking on his last name?
Steve Rizzo.
Steve Rizzo interviewed me on Hey, I'm Talkin Here when my book, Proverbs for Leadership, was first released. Matter of fact, I don't even think it was released yet.
It had not been. It had not
been. And Debbie then interviewed me after the book was released, and we had so much fun. Eric Bam is here.
Hey, Julie.
Julie Palmer-Preston is here. And we had so much fun. I thought that I would have Debbie on. And, you know, when I was thinking about what are we going to talk about, because we've talked about faith before, we've talked about, you know, understanding yourself and improving. And I know your book is called Find Your Fabulous, which to me is kind of like, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, the female version of Understanding Yourself and Improve. Because maybe my book is more masculine and your book, I'm thinking with Finding Your Fabulous, is definitely not a masculine thing, at least in my world, it's not.
Well, you know what? Even guys need to find their fabulous, because what the book actually means is, it is geared more toward women, but we all, but you're right. Like, finding your fabulous isn't about the clothes you put on your back. It has style stuff in there, but it's more about finding that inner love of yourself, the self-love, and, you know, appreciation for who you are, and to grow and get better. Because then no matter what you wear, you feel better in it because you own it and you know who you are and you love yourself, not in a conceited way.
And that's why tonight our theme is Understanding Fabulous Improvement. Do you see how I melded all that together?
Yes, you're the master.
But before we get deep into that, I got two questions for you. One is the same question I ask everybody. So we'll throw it up here. What does Matthew 6:33 have to do with understanding fabulous improvement?
But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be given to you. Matthew. So it does it all. And really, finding your fabulous is all about finding your faith, believing in something bigger than you are, loving who you are, because we're all God's creatures. So creatures, but you know what I mean. We are. And so, you first need to seek him in order to find you. So that's how that all comes together.
That works. Absolutely. I talk about all the time that I look at this and think that is, if you're first seeking God's kingdom and his righteousness, his right way of doing things, you're going to succeed. So you and I just said the same thing. So I was perusing your LinkedIn profile.
Okay.
And one particular thing jumped out to me. Now, I know you're older than 8 years old.
Yes.
And there's nothing on your LinkedIn prior to 2015. So
that's when I
was Debbie doing?
Debbie was full-time wife and mother, engulfed in school programs with my children and the community. I did not have a LinkedIn profile until 2015, and I just started from there. Even though I had a lot I had going on, it was never a paid position. I was always a volunteer, and I did a lot, you know, in the community and at church, and my kids went to parochial schools. And as we all know, those schools that really parent-based, and I was there almost every single day, which I loved. And so when I then transitioned out of just being a mom, which when I say just, that always makes me cringe, because it's a very important job, of course.
Very.
But yes. But once my kids got older and I knew, oh my gosh, why didn't I have the forethought to know that I'm preparing them to go fly away? but I
Right.
haven't prepared myself for what my next venture will be when they fly away. So it was a whole self-discovery that I'm still going through. But that's when I decided to start my first little side hustle, which was actually called, and still is, Find Your Fabulous, an image consulting business where I work mostly with women, but I had a lot of male clients too, and help them find their fabulous with what they wore. But it also turned into a lot more. When I'd work with people one-on-one, it almost was like therapy session for both of us, because some of the things they were going through as far as feeling good in what they were wearing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It turns into, you think you look in the mirror and you don't love the clothes. A lot of times you look great in your clothes. It's how you think you look in the clothes. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that's the deeper issue. So then that's what kind of propelled me to write this book.
So what? So when you moved on from, I don't want to say you moved on from supporting your children, but when you
They're on their
moved,
own, Sean.
because I've got, my wife and I have a 28-year-old son, a 28-year-old daughter-in-law, and a 25-year-old daughter, and we help them, they help us. We all talk about lots of things.
Yes.
But why did you make the decision? How did you make the decision to be entrepreneurial
Mhm.
as opposed to going to work for the man?
Well, that's fine. Let me just go back to one thing that you said about you learning from your children. You
Yeah.
teach. That is so true. I just have to go back to that and touch, because I mean, even when my kids were young, I would really, some of the things that they would say to me would make me think like, oh wow. And even like stop, like looking into the clouds. What are those? Why are they there? And look, and just the things that you get humdrum in your day and you got to get stuff done. And then all of a
Right.
sudden you're like, yeah, let's look up. Let's look up for a second. Thank you to my children for that. And then, also, um, as they have aged, the things that I am learning about myself through them and about the world through their eyes is amazing. So, back to your question.
Yeah.
It's kind of the I just felt like I've worked for the man and I loved it. It was amazing. I had great bosses. I got along with the work people and all that. But when I was trying to find my new way,
Right.
um, I knew that I always still wanted to be hands-on with my family, but I also I always wanted to have a boutique and I wanted to style people. And I've always done that with my friends anyway. And so I thought, they're in our town that I live in, no one was doing what I thought I wanted to do. So I didn't necessarily want to start the boutique right away, have a brick and mortar, because I didn't want to be married to a brick and mortar at that point.
Right.
And I'll get into this later, maybe. And I was a little afraid. I was like, oh my gosh, who do I think I am? Like, I'm going to go invest in a boutique. I'm going to, it's a lot of money. There was some fear there. So I thought,
Well, and you've got to wait for the people to come to you as opposed to going to the people, right?
yes. Yeah, that's a good point too. So I decided I'm going to do image consulting and I'm going to style people, get them ready for events, do wardrobe makeovers where I go in and say what's working, all that. So I started it, and by word of mouth, and then our local newspaper covered it. And I just got tons and tons of clients, had a blast doing it, learned a lot about myself in the process. And that's sort of what started to get my feet under me a little bit. And I learned a lot about myself and where I wanted to go next from that venture.
So in my book, Proverbs for Leadership, I talk about, and this is something that to this day, I think everyone struggles with. And I think as we walk along, we struggle with this concept less and less, hopefully. It's self-talk and self-sabotage. When you were first beginning with finding your fabulous and setting up your boutique, and doing all of that, starting a business after being just a stay-at-home mom,
Yeah.
which I say very tongue-in-cheek, because for most of my viewers know My wife homeschooled our children
Oh,
incredibly successfully. They got scholarships. They did all kinds of things. And, when people say, we homeschooled our kids, I'm like, I don't know what you did, dude, but I know your wife did a ton of stuff. So
oh yeah.
wife homeschooled our children. I was the deep voice on the phone when they were little and misbehaving. So, but my question is, how did you overcome what had to be the initial self-talk and self-sabotage that wanted to worm its way in? I'm sure you're like, just knowing you're like, yeah, I'm going for this, I'm doing it. And then like a month in, you're like, what the have I gotten myself into?
Oh my gosh, Sean. So even before I started it, I was getting in my head. I mean, I'm just being real here because we all do it. And I'm doing it right now, not right now currently on the podcast, but I'm doing it right now with getting ready to start Studio 11 style because it's a huge undertaking and there's things that I have to learn how to do because I'm going to stream some of it's a whole thing. But to get back to what your point is you get in your own head sometimes and
Yeah.
you give yourself all the scenarios of what could possibly go wrong and freak yourself out instead of thinking about all the things that will probably go right because I'm not afraid of work. I've got that in my favor. I'm good on that. But way back when I first started Find Your Fabulous, I had been thinking about starting it. I knew the name. I knew how I was going to do it. I knew the little activities I wanted to do with my clients. I studied up on all the trends, just all kinds of fun things, and didn't start it. So I had flown out to LA, and I have a group of girlfriends that we graduated high school with that we still stay in touch. Everyone's everywhere else. And every 2 years we meet somewhere. So we were meeting in LA. We all met. We had a delightful 5 days. I got on the plane to fly back east, and I was sitting next to a lady on the plane whom I did not know. And I thought, I'm not going to talk to her. Everyone was making fun of me that I talk to strangers and that people really don't want to talk on the airplane. So, like, zip it. Well, she talked to me first, and then we picked up conversation. And
Yeah.
this lady worked for Camp Empowerment, which is where women go to find themselves in what they are, their soul's purpose and what they want to do and fight fear. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she asked me what I was doing currently. And I told her what I was doing and what I wanted to do. And she goes, why aren't you doing it? And basically, coming from a perfect stranger, I felt like it was a God wink.
Yeah.
She was put in my path for a purpose, and it was to kick me in the seat of the pants. And she said, you don't want to grow old, be in a rocking chair and say, wish I would have tried it. She goes, if you try and it doesn't work out, so what? But what if you try and it does work out? What then? And I came home, and within a few days, I registered my name with the state. I got my business license. I met with my accountant, and I started it. And it's been an amazing, amazing journey for me because I've met all these amazing people. And they've helped me in return and inspired me to write a book.
So how did you meet Steve?
Okay, so Steve, I met him through the Grow Live Academy. He was a guest speaker on my Thursday night business class with Ken Walls.
Okay,
and
got it.
We were all on this Zoom, and I was just like enthralled with him. And it's a funny story because I knew the radio bit that Ken shared that evening that we listened to. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out. A long time ago, my son found it on YouTube and laughed and laughed and laughed over the bit that Steve Rizzo had done. And so there was an immediate connection there because I didn't know who Steve Rizzo was. And I didn't realize that it was Steve Rizzo that did the bit. But when I heard it, I remembered it because my son listened to it over and over and would belly laugh. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I asked him to be on my show. And he said yes. And
Steve is a gentleman.
Oh my gosh, we are fast friends. He's like my bestie, dude. I'm telling you. And now I'm his co-host. So was Eric Bam. I hope Eric Bam's still listening. Hi, Eric. And so, it's turned into this amazing friendship. And I'm so blessed to have him in my life. He's an incredible human being. So all of these things that have happened, even since I've written my book, of the doors that opened, the podcast that I've been on, invited to have really opened doors for me.
Yeah, it's amazing when you, because I have a feeling. So I want you to talk about this. When COVID hit, did COVID, after the initial shock, okay, because everyone, was kind of hunkering down for a few weeks to a month.
Yeah.
And then I know that I started being like, okay, this is stupid. I've got to be doing something. And I started watching Jeffrey Gitomer every day on YouTube, or on Facebook at first, and then YouTube. And that was how I met Eric Bam and the whole group that we ended up starting Megamind. And COVID ended up being a catalyst for Litvak leadership. Truly, if it wasn't for COVID, I started Litvak leadership the day after Labor Day 2020, and I was doing this every single day for 6 months. How did COVID affect your business? Because I'm sure at first it did one of these, but then you probably said, okay, here's the trampoline. Now let's go. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So the COVID did affect my business because I go to people's homes generally.
Okay.
I go to people's homes and we go into their closet
Lynn
or,
Serrano is in the house. All right.
and hi, Lynn. And I see Randy's here, Julie, Eric. Okay. And so I wasn't invited to anyone's house to help them. And I couldn't shop because most places were closed. So that did affect that. But I was still working as an independent contractor, which that's another business that I have where I do marketing for small businesses. But I have the Chillicothe City School District, but then they closed down. But the advertising that I sell to other businesses, we weren't even having games. Okay. And these clients continued to pay for their advertising that was on the Jumbotron, even though we were in COVID and very few games were played, if any. And that was beautiful to me. Like
And they still paid for it.
They still kept their advertisement and did marketing through us. And it was for me, that was extremely a loyalty and respectful to me, as like I had been doing their advertising for probably 4 or 5 years prior to that. And we had built a great business relationship. And they just said, no, we want to continue and we'll do it again next year when the world opens back up. And they're still advertising. So that was still happening. But during COVID, I ended up I'm not a runner. I love to walk fast and I work out a lot. But the gym was closed.
Right.
So I started jogging, which is hilarious because I always said the only place I run is to the bathroom. But I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And it felt really, really good to jog. And then I would do my boxing, with mitts and stuff out on the deck. I was outside as much as possible. And I'd go hiking and things like that just so I could be out in nature and still feel some normalcy. Yeah.
So COVID helped you get active in a way you hadn't
Well,
before.
you know what COVID did? This is something that people don't know about me.
All right.
I'm very chatty and I love to be around people, but yeah, shocker, but in small doses. So I am what do they call it? Like an extrovert introvert. So
You're an introvert is what you're trying to say.
I am. I really am. Hi, Kellyanne. I like my alone time. COVID did not hit me as hard as what people would have probably thought. It was not that difficult for me at all. I was okay.
COVID was interesting for us because I had been traveling at that time, probably 100 nights a year for work, and had been doing that for years. And then all of a sudden I'm home.
Yeah.
I'm home. And
that'd be difficult.
And when you're used to being gone a third of the time, it was different. And then at the same time, our daughter, who was a senior in high school, senior in college, comes in. And I remember the 4th day of the lockdown, she was like, well, I'm going back to school this weekend. And we're like, no, you're not. And she's like, spring break will be over. I'm going back to school. We're like, there won't be classes. And
Mm-mm.
she's like, yeah, but there'll be classes soon enough. And then 2 days later, they
Shut
sent
down.
notes from every college
Mhm.
saying, don't let your kids go back to school if they get sick. We can't do anything for them. So
Yeah.
that was the beginning of something different. I truly
Yeah.
believe that that whole age group, and not just my daughter's age, but even those who had graduated in a few years before that or a few years after it, their whole college experience is something totally different and entering the workforce. How
Well,
did
we
that
were just
affect
talking
your
about this.
daughter?
Listen
Yeah,
to yeah, she came home and did classes online during COVID.
right.
She was at The Ohio State University. But you know what? Think about this. The kids who were born when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when they were going to graduate high school, right, is when COVID happened.
Oh, you're right.
Isn't
I
that
never thought about that.
like, that poor age group, like, they were born into, like, the world shut down then, and then they a lot of them, a lot of schools couldn't have an active in-person graduation ceremony.
Graduation. Right. Yeah. Oh, our daughter graduated at our kitchen table, and the graduation pictures we have are her standing on our front step and my wife taking pictures with the phone.
And
I mean,
Tori, my daughter, they actually allowed them to go into the stadium for graduation. The year before it was shut down, they couldn't. So she was glad
right.
she just got to go. It was in May, but it was a complete rainstorm sideways, and it was about 50 degrees. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she sat with us, and they would just announce the class and the names that you didn't stand up or anything. And it took me like a full day to thaw. It was so cold. And so that was a whole thing, but we were glad that she could actually but it wasn't the experience. She didn't get a walk.
No,
She was
no.
sitting in a rainstorm in the stadium.
The following year at Indiana University in 21, they gave all the 20 students the opportunity to
Oh,
go graduate and walk across the stage. And our daughter's comment was, the moment has passed.
that's so true. I was just
The
thinking the
moment has
same
passed.
thing.
She's like, I've been working for a year. The
Yeah.
moment has
A
passed.
full year later, I mean, that's a nice gesture. That's very nice. That's such a nice gesture.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's been a year. My life moved on. I'm not going back there to walk.
So when you're talking to people about finding their fabulous and they start getting mealy mouthed about how they look, how they interact with people,
Yeah.
not all your clients, I'm sure, are like that, but I'm sure there's some. What do you talk to them about how their words affect not only themselves, but affect others and how they interact with them?
That's cool that you say that. And it's so funny because like image consulting, helping people get dressed would turn into conversations like this. But
Mhm.
I didn't, I would always say stuff like, I want to understand why you don't think that the things you already have. You have beautiful things in your closet and you're hiring me to come and help you when you clearly know what you're doing. And why don't you think you look good in these things? It was more of like, it was a question for me too. And I wasn't there. I didn't know as this started happening, and it happened quite a bit. Then that's when I started reflecting and I started learning more about myself because I could see myself in these women. And then
Mhm.
that led me on a path to figure out myself and why I have some insecurities. Why do I feel that I need someone else to tell me how I look in something or not? And so that then got the wheel turning on writing this book. I have it right here.
There you
It's
go.
yeah. Yeah, and it's a very short read. You can read it probably in 45 minutes. I did that
Oh,
on
wow.
purpose. I did that on purpose because I I wanted it to be something that you could pick up at any page and just read what's on that page and put it down. But the messages mean something to me, and it means something to me because I learned about myself and through my clients in the process. And
What's the number one thing you've learned?
the number one thing I've learned is to be, well, this is going to sound so cliche, and love yourself. Like, I get sick of hearing myself say it because it's so, but it really is for me personally, what I've
Yeah.
learned most on the last few years of my life is to care more about who I am and loving myself than caring about what other people think of me. I mean,
Say that again for everyone to hear it again. That was
I
good.
learned most for me is that I need to care more and pay more attention to how I feel about myself and loving myself more than what other people think of me.
So when people then say to you, "Oh, Debbie, you don't understand. I've got this issue, that issue, and I've got this, big beauty mark right here, which is, commonly called a mole. I've got this big beauty mark here. You don't understand." What do you say to them?
Well, the thing is, of course, I can't always understand what someone else is feeling about themselves, but
Mhm.
I have a whole slew of my own issues that I think about for myself that I'm working out. So the part about me that it's always come very easily to me is to feel for other people. I'm very sympathetic, empathetic to other people. Naturally, I've been like that since I was a kid. I can remember feeling when someone says something about negative about themselves, feeling badly, like it just bothered me. And
Yeah.
if someone's sad, I don't want anyone to be sad. And so for me, when I work with people, or if it's just a friend, I know my friends know this for a fact. I've had the same friends for 100 years, and I've got a lot of new ones. But if there is something that's bothering them and they talk to me about it, I'm gonna sincerely listen and care, and that doesn't mean I understand what they're going through for real, because you don't know until you walk it yourself, but I can definitely feel that for them and hug them and tell them I love them, and that, let's some advice that maybe can help us get through this. I just it's hard to say, I know exactly what you mean, that you don't like the way your body's shaped, or you don't like my daughter has vitiligo, Sean, which is a skin disease that causes white patches all over her skin. When that
Okay.
popped up when she was 5 years old, I was devastated. As a mother, you think you can cure, I'm gonna take her to every doctor. I'm gonna figure this out. And I got on this DNA study through a scientist in Europe, and I was doing everything I could to help her. And the bottom line is it is not curable. So her skin, when she tans, she has white patches that don't tan. It's an autoimmune
Right.
disease she has. And it makes her look different. I don't know how that feels to have that on my body, but I can certainly tell you I feel it for her. I don't want her to have that. It breaks my heart. So we all have our own stuff. And but my only advice is I'm going to be kind to you and love you through it.
Absolutely. I mean, when so one of the challenges with being an extrovert, because you're an ambivert. I've gotten more ambiverty over my lifetime. I used to be raging extrovert,
That's a
but
shocker, John.
being married to an introvert, who the two of us have really learned to meet in the center. People who meet my wife are very surprised when we end up having a conversation and somehow it comes up that she's an introvert and I'm an extrovert. And they're like, "Gosh, it seems kind of the opposite talking to you guys." And I've
Yeah.
learned how to be quiet when, we're in a group setting and she's talking. But it's the whole empathy thing that even to this day, I not necessarily with family, but with everybody else. Think empathy is a struggle, and I don't know if it's because I had a very strict father, or if he was one of those manly men, so you didn't really necessarily show empathy. But how do you recommend and that people allow themselves to have people truly get to know them and that they get to know other people? Because in my book I talk about that, and for me, it's all about going, okay, it's not about me. It's not about me. I've got to make sure this is not about me and just focus on the other person. But it's still something to be empathetic is a struggle. And I'm sure you've come across that with people.
Well, I don't know. So let me understand you correctly. Are you
Uh,
saying that because perhaps the way you were raised, it's more difficult for you to feel empathy for others?
yes.
Okay. So
I look at it as when someone has a challenge, that it's an excuse.
maybe that is a little bit in the way that you're raised, and maybe it's a little bit of your DNA. Because like I said before, it's very interesting because as far back as I can remember being upset for people that were upset about something. It doesn't matter what it is. If I can tell if someone's crying or if someone's like, I just don't understand. I'm like, oh, I feel it. I don't know where that comes from, but I feel that energy from people. And it makes me sad. I don't want people to feel. And so the only thing I can say to you is because, my daughter isn't all that I mean, she is, but she's a little more like, get over it, type personality, but then my son
I
is
have passed this on to my daughter. Yes.
oh my gosh, my son is like me. Like, he immediately like, "Oh my gosh, let's talk about it." And it's funny because he graduated with a psychology and business degree, and he works as a psychiatric assistant at Ohio State and in psychology, and then my daughter isn't in law school. So, it's like they picked the perfect professions. But I think that for people like you who
Your daughter is not happy with your comment.
oh,
She
she's so
is very
I take
empathetic.
back everything I said. Tori, you have to admit. Come on now. But, I feel like people who might be on the struggle bus a little bit, it's just a matter of not maybe taking it how you would handle it. I think sometimes you would say, well, you got this, you just got to figure it out and go do this. But not everybody, I always just look at it as I don't walk the path that other people do, and I don't know what they've gone through. And
Right.
for you, Sean, you may be the type of person who things can come at you and you deal with it. And you're just like, okay, this is tough, but I'm going to deal with it. And we may not even know the struggles that you've really had because you're not going to talk about it. You're just going to
I
deal
am
with it.
very good at being even keel for the world. Yes.
So when I feel like I've noticed in just my lifetime, I'm certainly not a professional therapist, but what I've noticed about people is the people who always hold things in and just deal with it and power through and not really talk about it with other people. When you hear other people do that, that's very vulnerable. You're
Hmm.
not willing to be vulnerable and you might see it as a weakness and it may be a turnoff to you. I mean,
Well,
I'm just being real with you.
I, as your daughter just said, feelings take a back seat sometimes, and it is my experience that if I let feelings whip me around, they whip me around. And it's better A to B, B to C, C to D, which is not how I necessarily want to be all the time. It's learning that balance. And I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe men have more challenge with it than women. I do
maybe.
say inappropriate things on this show. So if you think men and women are the same, all my viewers here, you're wrong, and you can just stop watching if you want, because men and women are different.
Yeah,
So
we certainly are. We are very different, and we're so much alike in some ways, and then just polar opposites in others. And one of these is you. Now I know my son is very sympathetic, empathetic, and he is
yeah,
more so openly with it than my daughter. So that's all I'm saying, Tori. But it's also I need to do better with not allowing those feelings that I pick up from other people rob me of a good day because
yeah,
I've been very upset for other people and it's bothered me so badly that it's kind of disrupted my day. So while you're trying to work a little more toward the opposite way, I'm trying to work
absolutely.
more toward you where I can say, okay, I'm sad for you, and I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to be here for you, but it's not me, and I got to live in the moment and be here and be present and be okay.
So when you're listening to clients and they're going on and on about how, well, I shouldn't say on and on, when they communicate to you that I don't like this, I don't like that, I need to do this, I need to do that. I mean, what is your method of guiding them into finding their fabulous as opposed to letting them wallow in their feelings?
So most of them aren't that wallowy. I mean, they really aren't. It's been really an incredible experience meeting these women and learning from them. But there have been a few clients who wanted hired me to help them, but then they weren't necessarily agreeable with
Mhm.
my choices as far as what to wear or whatever. And so you got to be a strong person to listen. Here's the thing about this. You have to be when you go into someone's closet and they're trying clothes on for you and you're
Yeah,
explaining to them what you feel because you've hired me as a professional to help you, then I have to be 100% honest. It's not like a best friend, you're going out, does this look okay? And I probably still wouldn't say it does if it didn't, because that's just how I am. But I definitely would be less apt to say, I would go change your shirt or something. But so when I work with women and I'm giving them instruction and they disagree, I have to then be very sensitive to that, because sometimes they want the help, but they're not ready to make the shift
yeah,
into what fits their body. Because listen, men's bodies change, but let me tell you something, people. Women's bodies shift. You have a baby, you still have the clothes in your closet that you wore before you had a baby. And then you go back and you try to wear those same clothes. Things aren't working. You might be able to wear them, they might button, but things are shifted around. So, sometimes you have to say, maybe we'll put this away for a little while and let's find some stuff that fits you now. You may be able to come back to that later. And a lot of times you can, of course. But I'm just saying, bodies change, styles change, and
yeah,
sometimes we don't want to change. And
sure.
that sometimes with clients, that can be a tough a tough thing for them to do.
Oh, it's funny. I've recently um, gotten a bunch of new golf shirts. I think this is an older one, but I've gotten a
Well,
bunch of
you
new
didn't
golf
wear a new
shirts.
shirt for me? What's
I,
wrong
I
with you?
didn't. I didn't. And and they're all very summery colors, and it's amazing. I wear them, get a compliment every time.
Aw,
Every single time when I wear them out. And it's like, what is that? It's an orange shirt. You're like, oh,
right,
but
period.
it looks so good with your complexion, Sean. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
But you know what, though? Don't you realize too? And as much as we would like to think that clothes don't matter, okay, because it is about the inside, but there is something about getting dressed and feeling like you look good and your clothes feel good on
Yeah.
you. It really helps you get off to a good start, just like a meditation and prayer, drinking plenty of liquids, wearing a nice outfit, getting your feet
Absolutely.
on the earth, getting grounded. All of these things are amazing. Oh,
Mom
and
has hurt my cold heart before telling me, hey,
then
that looks bad.
yeah, what is it about when you talk to your family too? It's just like, "Bleh,"
I-
instead of like sprucing it up a little bit, like making it sound nicer. You're all Tori. Tori's trying to pull the heartstrings here, like trying to recover from the
Yeah.
comment I made about her not being sympathetic.
She's working the chat box
She's
there.
working the
So,
chat box.
so how do you balance talking with clients for you and talking with family, because it's interesting because you're always so nice to clients, right?
Well, you
You're always so nice to clients, and like you said, family kind of just gets it. But I've said to family at times, what do you want me to treat you like a client? And at times they've said, yes, do that.
know what's crazy? And I mean, we can sit here and pretend like, oh my gosh, I say everything exactly like I should. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's so not true. And but at the
So
same
not.
time, but at the same time, I also feel like, gosh, you know, why? I'm not saying I'm a hellion here at the house, but I will say that sometimes you're just,
Victoria, this is your opportunity.
yeah,
Okay.
she'll be chat boxing it up. But you know, it's almost like when you feel comfortable with someone, the bottom line is we should treat our family better than anybody.
Yes,
We should treat
absolutely.
ourselves with respect, ourselves, not talk down to ourselves and all that stuff. We should talk good to ourselves. We should talk great to our family and our friends and our clients. But I think
Yeah,
what it is, it's the relax factor. It's
it
where,
is.
oh my gosh, I'm tired. I've been out all day. I've had to really, you know, make sure I word things appropriately with, you know, people buying Jumbotron ads and appreciating them, which I do. Or if it's a client that I'm working in their closet with them, you know, it's a lot of energy and effort to put in and make sure that you're not saying anything that would hurt feelings. And then you come home and then, as my friend says, it's like word vomit. It's like, get the dishes off, bring that, put that up. Why'd you leave this on the floor? You know, and it's just, I guess, human nature. It doesn't make it right, but I'm
No.
guilty. I'm guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, you're aware of it.
Yeah.
I know that as abrupt as I can still be sometimes, I've told some of my coworkers at times, I'm like, you think I'm direct now? You should have met me 10 years ago.
You know
I'm
what?
like,
Can we
my,
just
my
talk about
worst
what made me
moments now are so nice compared to then.
Sean, seriously, like we've already talked about this when you were on my show, but I would have spit my tea out if I had been having a sip when you told me. And I mean, I don't know if we have time, what's going on, but I
No,
would
no,
love
go
for you.
on.
So, all right, he's on my show and we're just talking about his book. And at the time, his book was, well, by the time you were on my show, your
It was
book
out.
was released
Yep.
because I had a copy. I got a
Yep.
copy of it. So you were talking about how at work and you were you know, you were over people, you were a manager, and there was this training that was going to happen. And I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but the bottom line was you said all of the people and we all had to go to the training, and you said I was that guy that needed the training and I was leading these people.
Yeah.
And when the revelation, the self-awareness kicked in and you're like, oh my gosh, I need the training. But it was, tell me, how did you say it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
funny.
And while we had to do a training, and it was a rolled out corporate training, and I had to train my team, and we had to train people on emotional intelligence and putting others first. And you know, when this training came out and I was going to lead it, my team, you know, was kind of snickering because we all knew that here I am leading the training, going through it, and it's like I should have just had a mirror up in front of me the entire time because I
But
was not
wait, did you
necessarily
know?
self-aware.
Yeah, you weren't self-aware because you said that like you were sending messages to like people who didn't actually work for you to get things done. And
Yeah,
it was the
well,
delivery of
support
your
staff.
messages and stuff. But
Yeah,
did you know that you were that guy and before you went to training, or was it during
no,
training and you're like,
no.
oh
It
my,
was during the training as I was reading it because you know I have had to learn that you need to ask people for when they can get something done as opposed to asking for something and
yeah,
then telling them when you need it. You have to wait for them to give you a deadline that is outside of when you need it and then ask, may I please have it by this date instead? I would say,
yeah.
hey, I need this for a proposal. Can you put this together for me, please? And I need it in 3 days.
Right. And then when you were talking to your, you know, other managers and they said, Sean, they don't actually work for you.
Work for you.
And you're like, oh, shocker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just trying to get some work done around here.
Just trying to get the things done that needed to be done for the organization. So, yeah, I had to find my fabulous way of communication. Hence, Proverbs for leadership. You must understand yourself and improve if you desire leadership that produces success in others. The improve part Got to
Oh, and you know what?
understand
This
and
is what
improve.
I love about you, though. I love the fact that you did in the training say, I am that guy. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
you did something about it, you know? And that's going back to the topic that you created for today about understanding yourself to find understanding fabulous improvement. So, being able to say, like for me, like if I'm gruff with my daughter, apparently, get this done, pick this up, whatever, that the delivery of my and I've told her before too, because I think she can, say, gosh, that wasn't nice. Well, the delivery of my message could be better. I should take an
Right.
extra second to say it in a different tone. Maybe it's not always what you say, it's just the tone of it too. So,
Yes.
just improving ourselves, being self-aware enough, like you saw of yourself, to say, I can do X, Y, and Z better, and this is what I'm going to do to work on it, and that's how I'm going to find my fabulous.
And you are very giving and nice about that. Let me tell everyone, still a struggle, still something that when you think you have arrived at the issue you've been wanting to overcome or the issue you need to overcome, once you decide you have arrived, that is when you're going to start going backwards.
You know what? That's so crazy that you just said that, because I was saying to some people just recently in the last few days that, when they were like, find it, like the name of my show, right? That you were
Right.
on.
Find it.
Find it isn't necessarily find your fabulous, but it can be. But it's finding new things, new ways to grow, just the day that I feel like I have arrived, let me meet my maker, right? I have not arrived. I am going to continue to try to find it, whatever it
Absolutely.
is, for the rest of my life. And I don't know, and no matter what you think you have found, you can always find it a little better too, whether that's in
Yep.
faith or success or self-awareness. We all can grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have gone 47 minutes on a 30 to 40-minute show. Easy for us to talk, which
I know.
was not a surprise. You got two extroverty ambiverts chatting away on, the intersection of our books. So pretty simple. So Debbie, as we're winding down in the last minute,
Wrap it up.
tell everybody a final thought on understanding fabulous improvement.
Okay. Well, you know what? Understanding your fabulous improvement is first understanding what makes you tick. What's your passion? Well, who are you? What's your soul's purpose right now? I know I'm finding it now. I've had a lot of different soul's purposes. Being a wife and a mother is my number one that I've been, and I'll always be that. But you know what? What makes you tick? What do you love? What do you love to do? What makes you feel good? Are you doing that? You don't have to quit your day job, but maybe there's something you can add that'll help you feel better about you, and figure out ways to like who you are, and the things that you're self-aware enough to know that you need to work on it. It's okay. You don't have to fix it all in one day, one little step at a time. It's all good. And I also want to tell you guys, my new business I'm starting that I'm launching in October is called Studio 11 Style. And I sure hope you guys will come and find me, because I'm going to have some really good stuff and some fun ideas that I have for my streaming clients to learn. It's not just about selling clothes. There's going to be messages with every single thing I sell. And I even told my friends I'm having some really, like Lisa Perna is going to pray over my inventory before I mail it out. I just thought God needs to be in this.
Yes.
And I just feel like, let's pray over all my clothes I hand selected before we mail them out. And she said she would do that for me. So I'm excited.
That doesn't surprise me about Lisa. That's great. That's great. All right, everyone. This has been Litvak Leadership Live. Debbie, thank you so much for being my guest. Easy to chat, and we will have to do this another day. See you, everybody.